I can already feel the feels, like, with this. It's setting up for a tragic ending. It's very obvious. You could say it's slow, which, in fact, it is. But this episode mainly was kind of there to show us that it's wanting to build up into a tragic type of ending. And I'm liking the new direction that Plastic Memories is taking. As I said in the last week's episode, I'm glad Plastic Memories finally got back on track with what it needs to do. It needs to go back onto this, very emotional track that it was doing in the first episode. And I'm glad to see, once again, it carries over these feels, emotions, and tragedy that is slowly building up throughout the series. I'm glad that this episode continued that atmosphere, and it makes me appreciate this episode so much more. Now, of course, there was comedy here and there throughout this episode, and for the most part, it just depends what type of comedy you like, if you enjoy that comedy or not. Now, the comedy in this episode was mainly just stalker comedy or kind of romance type comedy. How a girl wants to figure out, like, why he always smiles or why he's acting like he is. Stuff like that. That's kind of the comedy that was used in this episode, along with, the stalker girl that was watching through the binoculars. They got a freaking pencil almost shoved into her eyeball. Holy shit. It was kind of that type of comedy, and give or take, depending what you like, you might like that comedy, you might not. Personally, I enjoyed it. It's not the best comedy I've ever seen, but personally, it's good comedy. It's enough for me to really chuckle when it came to the episode. But the main thing, though, when it came to this episode, since it was slow-paced, there's just trying to show us that our main male character is not giving up. Like, even though he knows now that our main female character has a time limit and she will die, he's not going to stop being around her. He's not going to quit being her partner. He wants to continue to be with her till the very end, and that shows you what type of character he is, along with his characterization and personality, along with showing you this connection between these two characters building up for the tragic finale of Plastic Memories. Because as we know, judging by how, our main female character was kind of avoiding people and didn't want to really make connections or whatever, now you can see why. I mean, with this build-up with this episode, she's trying to make connections, and you see some romance progression going on. I don't know where the romance is going to go. I'm really curious about that. Like, is this series going to turn into a romance? Or is it just going to keep that as, like, a subplot? It's just going to push that to the side a little bit. But it's very obvious, though, with the way this episode is done. It's just trying to show us that these two characters are building up to get closer just before we can have a tear-jerking ending. That's exactly what this episode was. It was to connect these two characters to where we, as the audience, will see them connected. And then when it wraps up towards the end of the series, we are going to be very upset, which I already sense it happening. Because this episode, it had a very good atmospheric vibe to it. Like, the music, especially towards the beginning of the episode, when you see how she's by herself, and she's just sitting by herself in her house, like her dorm, and when you just see this music and the animation on her as she's lonely. Very emotional scene, without words. It really was a good scene, and I have to compliment the studio that animated this episode. They did a good job with showcasing emotions on her face without really her saying anything. And that's kind of what this episode was. Like, it's a very, very short episode that is just simple. It's a simple episode that just goes down that route to develop our characters. There's not really much you can really dive into compared to how the last episodes were. I mean, there is some comedy, especially when it comes to the binoculars, to the stalking, to the romance, misunderstanding, stuff like that. I mean, it's very fun, but it's nothing that we haven't seen before, and it's nothing really important that we should say, oh my god, this is fucking amazing. But the episode, though, got the point across, and I'm liking the pacing, though, of this series. Even though we could say it's slow, the pacing of this series needs to be slow. It needs to be slow to build up these emotions, because when it comes to a series that is built upon tragedy, or a series that's built upon giving you feels or sadness, it needs to have this slow progression to be able to have us as the audience, or readers if you read the manga already, to be connected with the characters. We need time to connect with characters, and that's what this series is doing. It's trying to connect us to where we will get emotionally attached, and then when they're taken away and ripped from under us, then we'll be upset. That is what this episode was to serve. And did it connect us to the characters. That really depends on the viewer. That really just comes down to you as a viewer if you grew connected to our characters in this episode. Personally, to me, I'm already starting to feel a little bit of feels because I know for a fact the way this is going, it's probably going to end in tragedy. So I'm starting to grow connected with the characters, but we'll have to see where the romance goes along with, you know, how the story progresses from here on out, and if the theory that me and Chibits made last week in the last review, if that is actually going to be true or not, if there's a timer set on the Giftia just to make more money from a company. We'll have to see. So yeah, that's about it. A pretty quick review, because you know why. But tell me your thoughts. You all have a wonderful day or not, wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.